Happy Monday and welcome to the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. I'm Chris Lee, joined by my co-host Gavin Schoenwald, or maybe we should call you Nostradamus. We'll get into why of that in just a minute. Our apologies to those of you watching an earlier version. We had a technical glitch. It was just beyond our control. The only way we could get through that was just to reboot. So we're going to do a take two of this, and our apologies to you. We do respect your time, those of you who show up at 11 every day. Again, this was something that was beyond our control, but we're going to make the most of it. Gavin, was not always the most interesting weekend of SEC football in terms of watching the games. It left a little bit to be desired.
Yeah.
But we did have some takeaways from this. I think mostly at Georgia and at Tennessee, to be sure. Both teams had weekends to be proud of.
Yeah.
And now we get set for the stretch run where you've got really four SEC teams squarely in the mix for the playoffs at this point. I mean, squarely might be taking it a little far for Ole Miss and LSU, but there's certainly a path for both those teams. And so here we sit a day away from Halloween, and I'm excited about what we're going to see going to the finish line.
Yeah, coming down the stretch here now, and yeah, not the most exciting weekend of football. I think there was, in the afternoon slot between, in our conference of Georgia, Florida, and then a big one out west in Oregon, Utah, and a couple others. They were all kind of runaway blowout games, and so, but still, lots of stuff to talk about today, Chris. USC and A&M, Kentucky's passing game all of a sudden being born finally, and Auburn as well, and that. But yeah, dominant for performance from the big dog in Georgia this weekend against Florida. And Florida came out to a hot start, and Georgia flexed their muscle the rest of the way and, left no doubt. And so, yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about, even though maybe it wasn't the most exciting weekend, but still some good weekends for some specific fans out there of teams, and really excited to dive into it today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some implications from what we saw this weekend. We'll get into several games. We'll lead off with Georgia, Florida in just a minute. We'll also let Gavin have the space to brag a little bit about his predictions, which, my man, I poked a little fun at you for some of them, and guess what? I was wrong. So I'll let you gloat in just a minute. Before we do that, a reminder that our channel today, our show is brought to you by friends at Bet Online. The last of major pro sports leagues has kicked off. That's the NBA. Bet Online is your top spot for your NBA action all week. You got a buddy in the NBA.
Oh, yeah. Good buddy.
Good buddy. With MLB postseason, which, by the way, that's getting interesting with the way the Diamondbacks are playing, NFL and college football and NHL in full swing, BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. And by the way, speaking of trends and predictions, we're going to unwind maybe a little later in the week BetOnline's odds for the college football playoff, because I think those are kind of interesting. So we'll get to that a little later in the week. BetOnline allows you to get everything for the NBA at your fingertips in both desktop and mobile access for every sport. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action. Don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Receive 50% off your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, the game started with Auburn and Mississippi State this past weekend, where you nailed one of your picks. And I think this is the one that I had the most problem with.
Yeah.
But you called Auburn's passing game getting on track for sure.
Yeah, well, what we're talking about here is from last week, Thursday's show. I gave a list of bold predictions for this weekend. And look, they're called bold for a reason, because they're not necessarily predicted to happen, but it's definitely something that could, whether it's a trend or, something to finally get over the hump. It's just, some things that I identified last week. If a team's had a chance to win the game, these are the things that need to happen. So, I gave a list for A&M and South Carolina. That kind of played the part out. Georgia, Florida, we talked about someone needing to step up, Dominic Levitt, but really it was Ladd McConkey. But the ones that I nailed that Chris made fun of me for were these next two, which was Mississippi State and Auburn, and just talked about my bold prediction was Auburn's a different team at home, and they find a way to win big as the passing game finally hits its stride. Holy smokes, that was the script of the game, wasn't it? Right. Yeah. And the first two drives, literally, I think the first two drives, Thorne was through for like $120 and 2 touchdowns. You look up by the third quarter, he's in the 200s with 3 touchdowns. And, we're seeing explosive touchdowns from Peyton Thorne in this Auburn offense of 25 plus 40 yards going over the top, something that we have not seen from this team all year. And so now that's clicked. What does this look like moving forward? They got Vandy next week on the road. A couple of the big one with Alabama. Look, they're probably not going to beat Bama, but still, the team that played this past weekend, as the passing game comes alive, gives them at least a shot in their remaining schedule going forward. And then I talked about Tennessee and Kentucky. I think Tennessee's defense was going to be so zeroed in on Ray Davis because Devin Leary and honestly and his receiving core has been a disappointment this year. My prediction that game, I picked Kentucky to upset them, but I thought it would be by way of a career game from Dane Key, Barryon Brown, and holy smokes, Devin Leary throws for 370. Dane Key and Barryon Brown both have touchdowns, individually, and so that's stuff that we haven't seen all year. They're usually leaning on Ray to be that bell cow back. So some bold predictions that either hit right on the money or just off from this past weekend. But man, now the pressure's on, Chris. I gotta make sure this is a weekly thing. I can't be going 0 for 4, 0 for 6 next week, man. If I'm 4 for 6 or whatever I was this past week. But still, great football, great predictions. We'll see if we can keep it going into this next week.
Yeah, I feel like it's like you're going fishing and you've got a 6-pound test line, and next thing you know, you've hooked an 80-pound catfish, and you're not quite sure what you're going to do. I feel like the point of bold predictions is not necessarily to get them right, but to maybe outline some things that if things go, if the dominoes line up, maybe you can nail a couple or get close and sort of paint a picture that's a little outside the box. I don't think we actually expected you go and nail most of these right off the jump. So
yeah, it was maybe it was beginner's luck, but we'll see if I can keep it going.
It's like the coaching equivalent of when you're in a rebuilding year and you go 9-3 that first year when nobody's expecting. At that point, you've upped the bar to the point where you can only disappoint.
That's right, man. You got it. I got to keep it going. I got to keep it going.
And you thought we were friends, didn't you?
Yeah, now the pressure's on, man. Jeez.
In all seriousness, we had some fun with that. We'll do that again this week since that works so well. Florida, Georgia. That game kind of flipped in one play. The snap to ETN where they tackle him in the backfield. Georgia takes over at the Florida 35 or whatever that wound up being. Gets a touchdown in no time. Tacks on another one a couple minutes later, then another one late in the quarter, and then blocks that punt and gets that safety. We talked about the path to victory for Florida being to continue to keep its defense off the field, and no team in this league has kept its defense off the field more than Florida in terms of plays it has run. But when Georgia flipped the momentum, and remember, Florida led that one 7-0 early.
Yeah.
But as soon as Georgia made that play and just blitzed Florida with 3 pretty quick touchdowns, it was over. That sort of ruined the form. I mean, look, you're not going to beat Georgia down double-digit points most of the time anyway, but that kind of ruined the game flow situation for the Gators in that case.
It did, and we talked about game. I literally think we talked about game flow for maybe a whole chunk of 30 minutes of one of our previous shows last week, and that got thrown out the window because Georgia was basically able to dictate the terms of the entire game. I also outlined keys to the game for Florida to win, talking about establishing the run game, third down percentage, and all those weren't horrible. I think Florida still ran for in the hundreds, but you have the like you talked about, the turnover on downs in your own territory of trying to get cute, snapping between the guy's legs all the way to ETN. You have a block punt that goes for a safety. Like, these are things that you can't even afford at all, no matter how well you're playing offensively and defensively, against a number 1 ranked team. And so, when those things started happening and then the touchdowns started piling up, it looked like it was really going to lean in Georgia's favor. And I gotta give credit to Oscar Delp as well. He's the backup tight end for Brock Bowers. And, Florida came out hot, came out juiced, scoring first early. And then, Georgia came down and Delp made a one-handed catch that really kind of secured confidence, not only in himself, but that, Georgia is still Georgia and going to have the playmakers all over the field. McConkey steps up in a big way, scampering for a big touchdown. And him and Lovett had huge days and long passes, I think, of 55 and 54, big chunk plays to each of them. And so they're still guys. They don't have Brock Bowers, but they're still dudes catching the ball for Carson Beck. He's grown up a ton. Think about how the journey he's been on since the beginning of the season, how he looked a little bit shaky and maybe a little daunting in that Auburn road game earlier in the year, and how much he's grown since then. And you're seeing the talent flash, the touch on the fade balls of touchdowns. And he's really coming into his own. And so teams grow, especially coming off a bye week. You get to throw routes on air and really get in sync with your receivers, and that's what they needed. It's also what Kentucky needed, and Auburn really getting going. So yeah, great week of football. But man, Georgia dominated. Best I've seen them look. I talked about Kentucky that looked really good, but man, did they look ever so good this past weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned Carson Beck, and when we had done that Wednesday show or whatever it was, where we said, hey, if Florida's going to win this game, and this is the team that we felt was getting better, this is what it looked like. And one of the questions that I asked you, maybe it wasn't that show, maybe it was another show, I said, who do you trust to win a game more? If this game goes in the fourth quarter, it's tied, and a quarterback's got to make a play to win the game, who do you trust more? Graham Mertz or Carson Beck? My answer was Graham Mertz because he had played so well. And Carson Beck, albeit he's having a really good season, and he's a very talented kid, and he's been in that system for forever.
Yeah.
But Graham Mertz is a fourth-year guy and a fourth-year starter, and Georgia just, let's face it, has not been in that spot a lot of times.
Yeah.
And even in some of the games that have been close for Georgia, you're like, okay, let's cut to the chase. Georgia's going to win this, and we all know it.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Not that Graham Mertz was bad. Both of them had 2 touchdowns and no picks, but the stat line in this one wound up no competition. And again, that scenario never happened. Mm-hmm. Carson Beck didn't have to win them a close game in the fourth quarter, but the reason Carson Beck didn't have to win them a game in the fourth quarter, among the reasons was Carson Beck, who was outstanding, 19 to 28 for 315, 2 touchdowns, no picks. That's a guy that averaged 11.3 per pass on Saturday, and you were now seeing him on the board, although I think he's maybe 8 or 9 guys down, depending on where you look, as a Heisman candidate.
Yeah. Well, I think, let's look at, I just 5 minutes ago bragged about how I got these bold predictions right. Chris, you and I took Graham Mertz, and, if you were asking me that today, I think I would take Carson Beck without hesitation. And so I got to give my props to the kid for having a big weekend and a great game. But I think we took Mertz, Chris, not necessarily for the whole game quarterback, but just, tie game in the fourth quarter because, he's really efficient, completes the ball at a super high percentage, and he doesn't turn the ball over. And so when you eliminate mistakes at the quarterback position, you give yourself the chance to win any game. That's why you and I took him, I believe.
Yeah.
But man, this guy looks, the upside and the ceiling for Carson Beck is so much higher, I believe, than Graham Mertz. The touch pass I saw, and towards later in the game after it kind of already been decided, but perfectly floating in there, the control over the offense, the confidence, the poise. I just really remember watching him at that Auburn game early in the year, and it was his first start as a road test. He looked a little bit shaky. And, Brock Bowers won that game for him in the fourth quarter. He totally took over and won it for him by himself. Now that guy is not there. Not only, do they need him to be better, but the guy that he usually depends on is not there. And so, man, I could not be more impressed with him. But who are we to judge, man? There's a reason Kirby Smart didn't go grab, a starter in the portal. And, anybody in the country would pick up the phone and transfer their school to go start for Kirby Smart at Georgia, give them, the chance to win a national championship. But they sat tight, didn't panic, trusted in their guys. And, man, I got to give them credit because, they obviously saw flashes in previous years, through spring ball, fall camp, where they said, we don't need anybody else. This is our guy.
Yeah.
He was maybe a little bit questionable at the beginning of the year, shakiness, but, man, has he grown? And it definitely gives them a chance to win it all this year, no doubt.
I'm not going to call Carson Beck a game manager, but a lot of what you need your quarterback to do when you're Georgia is just not make mistakes. And this is where he is as we head into Halloween. He's completed 73% of his throws, almost 9.5 per throw, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. And I think a couple of those picks came in spots where I'm not going to say Georgia had the game locked up, but the chances of Georgia losing was pretty remote.
Yeah.
And look, here's the other thing about Georgia. I look at this and, I don't know, does Georgia have the top duo of receivers or top trio in the SEC when everybody's well? I don't know. I mean, you could argue if you include tight ends, which Brock Bowers is not available right now. But when he is, you could say Bowers, McConkey, Levet about as good as anybody's, and they may be. But But here's the thing: you look at their receiving sheet, and even without Bowers there, you've got Marcus Rosenby-Jacksaint, 2 catches for 8 yards. Ra Thomas, 1 for 19. Those are guys that are probably the 1 and 2 on most SEC teams, or at least half of them, or maybe the 2 and the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And on this team, they're the 5 and the 6. It just goes to show.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
It is. Yep. And sometimes what's not in front of you doesn't get your attention because it's not in front of you.
Sure.
But that's just a reminder of how deep this Georgia team is. You lose Bowers, you figure those guys, any other situation, are going to be catching a ton of balls. And yet here we are where they're not even the first guys on the field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also a testament to the culture and the competitive culture that Kirby's built there. I mean, it is cutthroat, scrap and clawing for playing time. Like you said, there's guys who are catching 1-2 balls a game at Georgia who would be a lot of other SEC teams' number 1 wide receiver. And so, but there still has to be a number 1, number 2 guy at Georgia. So the guys are going to scratch and claw and compete their tails off. And, we're just talking about the receiver position. I think this goes for all positions, all 22 positions in that program. And so, in the trenches and linebacker position, there's always a Georgia linebacker or 2 that gets drafted every year, a Georgia edge that gets drafted every year. But look, all these guys that are getting drafted, there was somebody behind them at Georgia who was pushing them every single day. And so you can't be comfortable, and that's how they've grown and continually gotten better as well throughout the rest of the season, because they can play the second, third guy because he's still pretty darn good. And so that leaves the first guy to even work his tail off anymore. There's no type of entitlement. There's no type of, I'm the starter, my job's locked up. I think everyone in that program knows they need to go earn it every week. And man, they've done it. And that's why we've seen Georgia get better and better and better. And now, with their best performance of the year last weekend against Florida.
All right. And file this one away under the category of box scores can be a little misleading, although not really misleading because this guy looked great. If you were Kentucky and somebody tells you, all right, Saturday night, Devin Leary's going to go out there, sling it 39 times, hit 28 of them, 372 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. What are you putting the odds on that you win that game?
I would say they win by 10 plus, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, and then you're thinking we're not losing that one, right?
Yeah, no way. And like we talked about that, Chris, and we said in order to win this game, Kentucky's going to have to throw the ball. I didn't mean for 370 and 2 touchdowns. I just meant for like 240, 250, 260, like a respectable. I mean, they blew it out of the water, and having explosive players and Barryon Brown and Dane Key as well. We just knew there needed to be other options besides Ray Davis because he's just done it all for him this year. Yeah. And so if you would have told me that box score and, those 2 guys getting receiving touchdowns, I would have said, yeah, Kentucky probably just fired on all cylinders and then went up by 10 plus. But man, Tennessee found a way to win it. I was impressed with the way they utilized Joe Milton as a runner and just even like the quarterback stretch stuff, some of the zone read stuff it's not like he was running like Lamar Jackson, but 8, 10, 12, those are big chunk plays that make your defense have to adjust. And, I got to give my credit there. I thought Heupel called a great game, some, wide open touchdown passes that are obviously, schematic or whatever they're seeing up there in the box. And so I was impressed with Tennessee. Tennessee, they're always going to run the football. They always want to run the ball. There was a point there in the second quarter where Tennessee had run for $152 in the second quarter, and Kentucky had 30 yards of rushing. And so, I think we're so used to seeing Tennessee's offense going back to last year being spread out to the sidelines, throw and catch and run. Tennessee's a running football team. They are, as much as they are a spread team that you think air raid and all this kind of stuff, or all that kind of started back with Chip Kelly in Oregon and Marcus Mariota and them is now carried over to basically the modern day, offense. But Tennessee's done an unbelievable job of still, their identity is running the football if you watch them and, what they've been able to do. And so I got to give my credit to Heupel and his offense there and, what those guys have been able to do. The Tennessee defense is pretty stinking good as well, too. And so, I think they're a really good team. If you talk about the top tier of this conference, you're talking Bama, you're talking Georgia, LSU and is probably above them still. But, I mean, right there, Tennessee is right there. And, all fans know this as well. In order to get over the hump, you got to start, beating Alabama and beating Georgia year in, year out, not just a one-off thing. But, man, I'm impressed with Heupel. I'm impressed with Tennessee, and that's a lot coming from a Vanderbilt guy, y'all. I'm telling you, I am. So,
Well, Tennessee, we all know, wants to run the ball a little more than it throws it. And I think they'd been, I don't know, 52, 55% run coming in. That they went, what was it? I'll look at box score, 47 rushes, 21 passes. And there was some complaining that let Milton air it out a little bit more. And hey, he's 18 for 21 for 228 and a touchdown and no picks. And first of all, I thought that the one he threw to Nimrod with the DB slip, that was a gimme, but they took advantage of it. But here's the thing. We have seen Milton be very uneven. He'll come out looking like he's all SEC in the first half, and the second half can be very pedestrian, to be kind, or sometimes it's the reverse, that it's the first half he doesn't look good in. Point is, he struggled to put together two great halves. That gave Tennessee the luxury, getting a 10-0 lead, to not have to find out. And when you got Jalen Wright going 11 for $120, I mean, why do you need to change?
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's the luxury of starting fast. It's so important. And we saw two teams this week start fast, South Carolina and Florida, get the first touchdowns of the game and end up getting beaten by double digits. So it's not an always sure fact that if you score first, you're going to win the game or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that Milton is most comfortable when he's playing in rhythm and confidence. We saw that early in the Alabama game. Now, when Alabama pressed back at him, it was a little bit of a different story. But on the Kentucky side as well, I think falling down early, maybe whether it was a part of the game plan or not, forced them to open up the passing game, right, Chris? And kind of maybe try to score a little bit quicker. We talked about, in order to win, Kentucky, Dane Key needs a career day. Hasn't had a 100-yard receiving game. Well, here it is, 7 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown. That was a bold prediction of mine from Thursday, but I thought for sure if that was going to hit, and you told me Barryon Brown scores too, and Leary throws for 370, that Tennessee wins that game by double digits. But sure enough, man, I got to give credit to the Volunteers where it's due. They made the plays where it happened, and when the pressure did start mounting on when Kentucky started rolling there in the second half, a little bit almost reminiscent of what Alabama did a couple weeks ago. Tennessee slammed the door shut and locked it up. So got to give my credit there, learn from the previous week, and let's see how that affects them moving forward.
All right, let's wrap up a couple games. We touched on Auburn, Mississippi State. We talked about how Auburn had been better through the air. Something it needed to do was develop a passing game. I don't know if that's more about Auburn or Mississippi State. That secondary continues just to be awful. And some talk about Zach Arnett being on the hot seat. State's got Kentucky this weekend in what's been a weird matchup. Kentucky never really wins that game in Starkville for whatever reason. Then you've got at A&M, Southern Miss, and Ole Miss. I think Zach Arnett's going to need to do some damage down the stretch. So there's that one from the Mississippi State end. But let's move on because, frankly, I just don't think there's a lot to unpack in that game other than Jarquez Hunter getting going, which, again, that allows Auburn to get a game flow situation going in its favor. Where that defense plays, that's kind of what you want. Suddenly you can see the path to 7 or 8 wins for Auburn potentially, depending on that Alabama game at the end. A&M, South Carolina, not the most exciting of games. South Carolina just could not get enough going on offense. The injuries are really taking a toll. A&M didn't really look great in that one. The first quarter and a half, that offense really sputtered, but they get 3 touchdowns in the second quarter. And that was really all they were going to need because it felt like the matchup between Rattler and what he had left on that offense against that defense was pretty one-sided.
Yeah, and my bold prediction on Thursday was that South Carolina would fall apart a little bit and A&M would run away with it. It did look like that, but people also forget it was a 7-point game in the second half. But, man, the story of this game was there was a point in the second quarter where Spencer Rattler was sacked multiple times and then had 3 intentional grounding penalties in one quarter. I mean, Texas A&M's defensive line was possessed for the first quarter, or for the first half, and let it go. But I got to give credit to USC too, because they beat up Max Johnson as well, had 3 sacks in the first half too, and so it was a little bit of a struggle, protecting each team's quarterbacks. But, in the end, A&M's the team that found rhythm. To me, this game, the story is Anaya Smith, the play he made, the explosive play, cutting across the. I mean, that is the stuff. Those are the people you recruit at Texas A&M. The plays that those guys make. Like, to me, that needs to be a weekly thing, not necessarily from Anaya Smith, but he's one of those guys that can make those type of plays. And there's probably 4 or 5 of them on that roster, to be honest with you, Chris. And where has that been? That explosion where that's not coaching. That's not coaching. Look, it's coaching to get him open. But the guy breaking a tackle at the 30, spinning out, and then cutting across the field and diving across the goal line, that's Jimmy's and Joe's, and that's who you recruit.
Yeah.
And so that's what Jimbo's hung his hat on. And so I got to give him credit there. But man, it's such a season for A&M of what if, because it just doesn't make sense. It's like you're an ingredient list for a dish. They have every ingredient to make and it sucked. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And they're finally doing it. But also, man, I got to just watching South Carolina as well. Nick Harbor's a true freshman, big receiver for South Carolina, was their leading receiver in this game. Xavier Legette, 3 catches for 20 yards. That's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. He is a dynamic, big receiver that is wide receiver 1, really on any team in this conference. And 3 catches for 20 yards. And what we called, a must-win game last week is not going to cut it. And so there's some soul searching in Columbia, but man, the flash that we saw from Anaya Smith and the defensive line from Texas A&M, if they could just find that consistency all year, that's the type of dangerous team that A&M could be.
Vanderbilt Ole Miss, we talked about that very briefly on our recap show on Saturday night. That one was starting about that time that game hit the fourth quarter, maybe. That was never a game.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss scored 99 seconds in, led 7-0, was up 26-0 at half. Just didn't really need to do much from there on. Vanderbilt, that was an awful offensive game plan. I don't know what they were doing, going back and forth with quarterbacks, with Ken Seals and with Walter Taylor, who'd never played. Things looking bleak for Vandy. If you're Ole Miss, though, you're sitting there, and all of a sudden that scenario that Ole Miss fans have thrown out, which is, hey, what's our path to the playoff without getting to the SEC title game? That's not quite as far-fetched as it was. We'll do another day where we do playoff odds.
Yeah.
But just as a teaser, let me give you Ole Miss as of this morning. FPI has got Ole Miss at, 6%. I think that I was looking at Bet Online. I'm not sure they're on the board there. Probably ought to be. But here's the thing. If you're Ole Miss, okay, you take care of Texas A&M at home this weekend, which I think they will, but it won't be easy. You go in at Georgia. You beat ULM. You beat Mississippi State. At that point, Alabama would have to lose twice because you got a tie with Ole Miss there. Ole Miss has the tiebreaker with LSU. Not looking likely for the Rebels to get to the title game because of that head-to-head loss with Alabama. And I just don't know if Alabama's going to lose 2 games, although Auburn could do it. But point is, say Ole Miss wins all those games and doesn't go to the SEC title game, hey, depending on what happens elsewhere, that's one of those you go into Selection Sunday where you're thinking, hey, maybe we got a shot.
Yeah, I think maybe they got a shot. I think to me, there's like this kind of weird love triangle going on between Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, right? Because Ole Miss, if I'm Ole Miss right now, I'm feeling pretty darn good about where I'm at. My offense is playing well. Defense is playing better than years past. And, you have a tall task in front of you where you got to walk into Athens and find a way to beat the Georgia Bulldogs, the back-to-back national champion. Look, is that going to happen? It's probably not. It's probably not going to happen. Georgia's got a game at home. Ole Miss hasn't played well on the road or as well as they have at home. Talking about laying an egg at Alabama with the ginormous opportunity, and then a 7-point game against an average Auburn team and Jordan Hare. And so Ole Miss, already hasn't played as well on the road as they have at home. Not only that, but you're going to a place where a team plays really well at home in Georgia, and like I said, back-to-back national championship. But if Ole Miss finds a way to win that game, then you have Georgia going to Neyland with with SEC East on the line, I believe. Chris, is that correct? Because then you would have Georgia with 1 loss, and if Georgia loses that game in Neyland, they have 2 losses. Tennessee has 2 losses and wins the tiebreaker over Georgia because they beat them.
Yeah.
And so there's a weird little love triangle developing right now, y'all, between Ole Miss, Georgia, and Tennessee. And if I'm a volunteer fan, I am all eyes on that game in Athens between Ole Miss and Georgia, because, or even Missouri this weekend. I mean, I'm skipping over Mizzou, and so Georgia. Look, I don't want to call it a gauntlet, but they're playing some pretty tough teams.
It's kind of a gauntlet right now.
Yeah, a little bit run down the stretch here, and so it's going to be really interesting, because if Georgia drops 1, especially before the game in Neyland, that place is going to be bananas. That place is going to be absolute bananas, and with a chance to get to Atlanta. And so that little love triangle, I could see it developing. It's stuff that, as a player, and when you're talking hypotheticals and looking at the conference as a whole, you see develop. I saw a smidge of it last week, but now, especially with the way Ole Miss is playing confident, and they look like they're really taking on the identity of Lane Kiffin, of their coach. And so it's just going to be really interesting. If Georgia finds a way to drop 1, whether it's Ole Miss or Mizzou, before they go to Neyland, that game is going to be a nutty one. And so, look, I know it's many weeks ahead, and we have a lot of time to talk about that. But there's some interesting stuff developing as we head towards the finish line here, Chris.
You're right. You're catching some flack in the comments here. You're 0-1. I don't know what that's about, but
I'm not sure. I don't look at the comments while we're going on show, but that's all right.
Yeah, we started the show with how you nailed your bold projections, but we got somebody out there picking flaws. Yeah. All right.
And also, I also did not say that Florida would beat Georgia. Did not say Ole Miss would beat Georgia. So we got some selective hearing, but that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go over bold projections in a minute. Want to trot out some things that ESPN put out this morning, or maybe it was yesterday. Before we do that, a quick shout to 2 of our other sponsors. CHOMPS is a go-to snack for you after your workout, halftime, whenever. It has got a trial pack with 6 different flavors. Try that. It's got all 3 proteins. Delicious. They don't last long around the Lee household. They are gluten-free, free of 9 of the top allergens, no hidden harmful ingredients. So it tastes good. It gives you your protein boost, and it's good for you. I mean, what's not to like there? Plus, you get 15% off. So go check out the promo code that you can see in the ticker. I believe that is SE14. Get 15% off your CHOMPS order. You'll be glad you did. Okay, MyPerfectFranchise.net also is sponsoring this show. If you're sick of working for someone else, looking for a better life that you can live more of on your terms, and I mean, aren't we all? America's overworked, tired, hard to find time to spend with your kids for whatever. My Perfect Franchise and Andy Ludicky can help you with that. What you do is you go to Andy. He'll help you find your perfect franchise based on your goals, your dreams, your skills, your financial requirements. A wonderful human being. He will spend time with you. It is all free of charge. He will sit down and take an inventory of your skills, what you want out of life, and then match you with one of the many franchises they've worked with. He's helped hundreds of people on to bigger and better things. Call him 404-973-9901. Fill out a free questionnaire to get started. I've got to know Andy, just a tremendous human being, great at what he does, can very much help you get to where you need to be in life. So help out those who help our show. Give myperfectfranchise.net a look if you were looking for something else with your life. All right, bowl projections. This is according to ESPN, and they've got Kyle Bonagura, Mark Schlabach both weighing in. Both of them have Georgia and Michigan in the national title game. Both of them have Georgia and Washington in the Sugar Bowl to get there. So Georgia has kind of risen to the top as a college football playoff favorite. Wasn't exactly hard to predict, although certainly not certain by any stretch, as we have outlined. All right, they have got Kyle Bonagura's got Alabama and Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. If you didn't catch it, Oklahoma took a big loss to Kansas this weekend in Lawrence. Let's see, Schlabach has got Alabama versus Notre Dame, a really good 2-loss Notre Dame team in the Peach Bowl. So yeah, Alabama, according to ESPN, sort of on that fringe looking out. It was always going to be a tough needle to thread once Alabama lost to Texas. But, look, Crimson Tide's still squarely in it. I think that Georgia's performance this weekend, people are really buying that more, making Georgia's the team to beat than Alabama at this point.
Yeah, I think, look, the SEC's team in the college football playoff is going to come down to the game in Atlanta. And right now that's looking, especially after last week, it's looking like it's going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. And between they were in sync on offense between, Beck and then now Delp, who's the backup for Bowers, still playing at a high level. Love it. McConkey. And, we're talking about Georgia's offense, not Georgia's defense, which is just, ferocious and violent and, able to make plays all over the field. And so the SEC's bid in this playoff is going to come down to that Atlanta championship. And I do believe it's going to be Georgia. I thought it might have been Alabama, especially after the way, they've looked, and talk about a team that's grown through the season. Holy smokes. That team's came, light years from what they were, but, Georgia's getting better too. And right now it looks like the better team. So that's probably where my intuition would go, Chris.
All right, some of the lower tier bowls we've got. Let me see if I can find it. Somebody had Auburn in the Gasparilla Bowl, and I can't find it now. Here we go. That was Kyle Bonagura, Auburn versus Liberty. Now, that'd be interesting. Auburn and Liberty. Hugh Freeze's old team. That'd be on December 22nd, so that's a pre-Christmas game. Bonagura's also got Mississippi State and Troy in the Birmingham Bowl. Let's see, State would have to beat two of these four. Kentucky at A&M, Southern Miss, Ole Miss. Not sure I'm buying that, but somebody is. We've got, as I scroll down, I think most of the other games are going to be New Year's or around that time involving the SEC. And boy, those are going to be top heavy. Duke against Texas A&M in the Gator Bowl. Bonagura's got North Carolina and Florida in the Gator Bowl. I'm not buying that one. I don't know that Florida can win enough to get there, but we'll see. The Liberty Bowl. Kyle Bonagura's got West Virginia and Missouri. That seems selling Missouri low.
That seems selling Missouri really low. Really low.
I don't know that I buy that one. And Iowa State and Kentucky in Liberty Bowl. Now that I can buy. The Music City Bowl, both of them have Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. That one's a little surprised too. I thought Tennessee would be playing probably for a little bigger stakes. No knock to the bowl game in our backyard, but I thought I'd see Tennessee in a Gator Bowl or ReliaQuest, something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess they're assuming that Georgia's going to beat them. They're a 3-loss team, and maybe they find a way to lose another one against Mizzou or something. But we'll see. We'll see with that. Look, these are projections for a reason. They're not going to happen. We still got a lot of ball left to play, but definitely interesting to talk about.
The ReliaQuest Bowl. Bonagura's got Wisconsin and LSU in that one. Please no. Schlaball's got North Carolina and LSU. Now I'll take that. I'd like to see those two quarterbacks duke it out.
Yeah. That I think when you said earlier too was, did you say Texas A&M and Duke? Did you say that one? I think you said that.
Yeah.
That's interesting too. Mike Elko was the defense coordinator for Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M and is now doing a tremendous job at Duke. What does that look like? Is Jimbo even there for the bowl game? And I think so after this past weekend, but we'll see. But interesting matchup there, especially from a coaching position. Elko kind of coming up under Jimbo and now leading his team, doing an unbelievable job over there at Duke.
Yeah, I glossed right over that one, not intentionally, but there's been a lot of talk on Mike Elko potentially going back to Texas A&M. All right, last one, the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. That name just does not work for me. Sorry. Iowa and Ole Miss, please no.
Yeah,
both of them had that. All that's the.
Can Iowa score enough?
No, Iowa cannot score enough, which is why I don't want that to happen. That is completely uninteresting to me. So
give me Ole Miss and Oregon somewhere, man. I want to see the punter stay at home.
Ooh, I like that.
I want to see the punter stay at home, and I want to see Dan Lanning. And that dude, I would play for that dude tomorrow. Fierce, in your face coach, and versus Kiffin, who's the smooth criminal. That could be a fun little matchup for sure. So
Ole Miss feels like under Lane Kiffin, it should be in the Pac-12 almost.
A little bit. Look, and that's no dig. I hope before people come run at us.
I think Pac-12 is a great league this year.
I hear you. I think there's some merit to that in terms, and more so in the way that they function and their identity as a team. I think that's what you're trying to say. I think that they're, a quality team is better than a lot of teams in those conferences. But yes, you're right. They're kind of like laid back, little kind of surfer vibes a little bit, right? Like a little Pac-12 team. But man, they're Ole Miss is packing a punch. I think this could be the best result. We'll see what happens down the stretch, but for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss could be. We'll see.
All right, we are done for the Monday episode of SEC Daily here at Southeastern 42. We're back tomorrow on Halloween. Gavin might be sporting a different look. We'll have to wait and see. I might be too.
We'll see. We'll see. Could be fun.
Tune in for that, or tune in for the football talk. That's probably your better reason to tune in. But anyway, hope you do. Best way to make sure you do, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and enable your notifications. Again, we're sorry about today. We did have a previous version of the show that we started and had to get out of because of a technical glitch. So we apologize for that. But back at it on Tuesday, 11 Central. For Gavin Schoenwald, I'm Chris Lee. This is the SEC Daily at Southeastern 14. God bless you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Tuesday.